Rangan Chatterjee, welcome to High Performance.
Guys, thank you very much for having me. I'm pretty excited, flattered to be on the show. So yeah, can't wait to get cracking.
Great. I'm excited for this because having read the book, as I said, I think there are so many, I always hesitate to say life-changing things that people can take away from this because we hear that all the time, don't we? Every podcast everyone ever records is life-changing. But, you know, I think that I'm pretty in tune with how to track down happiness. And I have written down numerous things that I read in your book. So, you know how we always ask people at the beginning, what is high performance? I'd love to know from you, in the context of happiness, from all the people you've met, this book you've written, all the research you've looked at, in the context of happiness, what do you think high performance looks like?
If you'd asked me this question, I think 5 or 10 years ago, I'm pretty sure I would have given you a completely different answer. But in the context of happiness, and frankly, I'd say our wider lives, because I actually do think what we really all crave deep down is happiness, depending on our definition of happiness, of course. I think high performance, it's about presence. For me, I feel I am a high performer if I can be present in everything that I'm doing. It's easy to think about high performance as, you know, success at work. You know, I'm crushing it at work. I've done that before. I've worked so hard. I'm doing really, really well at work, but I come to the dinner table and sit around with my wife and my kids and I'm not there. I'm still thinking about work, or should I have done that? Should I have sent that email? That's not high performance, right? That's high performance potentially in one aspect of my life. But if I can't bring high performance into my family life, if I can't be a high performance husband, a high performance father, a high performance friend, then I think we've got a myopic kind of definition of what high performance is. And I used to have that definition. You know, I would have thought in the past, if I'm crushing it at work, if I'm doing well, if I'm seeing loads of patients, if I'm getting them better, I'm a high performer. But it's about presence. And I'm not there yet. Am I better than I was? Yeah, I'm definitely better than I was a few years ago. But am I always present in everything I do? No, not at all. But it's not a destination for me. It's a process. It's a journey. It's something I'm trying to work at every day. Like every day is a learning opportunity. Oh, when did I get distracted today? Okay, great. Now you know this is some small area you can improve on tomorrow.
See, what I love about that, Rangan, is that one of the fears that we sometimes have on this podcast is that it can almost come across as a bit preachy, you know, like that we're not checking our privilege in many ways. And I think there's people out there that might be listening to this that are in like quite difficult or straitened circumstances, or like are so mired in unhappiness. So I think what you're saying is that this is accessible for any of us. We can all start wherever we are. Is my reading accurate?
Yeah, Damien, you're spot on. The approach I've always taken with patients on my podcast, with my books, is how can you simplify and how can you make this as accessible as possible to as many people? Yeah. I think that comes from my own life experience. That comes from, you know, over 20 years now of seeing patients. I've seen tens of thousands of patients. And I guess for 7 years of my career, I worked in a place called Oldham, not far from here, where we're recording at the moment. And, you know, it was what would typically be called like an inner city practice, what would be considered a deprived population. Now, I don't love those terms, or a population who has low socioeconomic status. And I learned a lot. Right? I learned a lot that, yes, your surroundings and your environment massively determines how you feel about yourself. It can impact your life chances, your health. But I also learned that even in the midst of adversity, you can still make small choices every day that actually make a big difference. Like even if life is tough, if you can be present to that, you be present with your family, with your kids, you know, on one level you're winning. And I don't mean that to sound condescending, right? I feel I should at this point, you know, mention that I don't think when we talk about happiness, I understand money is something that people often think about. They might go, well, yeah, you guys can sit around, talking about happiness. You guys are doing well at life, right? And I get that. And the research, there's a bit of conflict in the research, but most of it points to this idea that once we have got enough to put a roof on our heads, to buy food for us and our family, to have that feeling of safety, most of the research says that when we earn much more than that, it doesn't actually make us happy. So I think the way I look at money and happiness is I don't think money in and of itself brings us happiness, but I think money can remove common sources of unhappiness. Is probably how I look at it.
Oh, I love that. So let's talk then from the viewpoint of the people that are listening to this podcast. And I love that early on in the book you talk about children and the joy of children. And this is really relevant because only yesterday we took our kids out for a play, and I was saying to my wife, they were just we were in the middle of the countryside, they were down an embankment like 20 yards away from us, and there was a drain pipe like for wastewater, and one was at one end, one was at the other with a couple of their mates. And I said to my wife, I bet you they feel a million miles away from us. They think this is some amazing adventure, and they may well have a tiny snapshot in their heads of in 20 years time of this moment where like we were in the countryside somewhere, there was like a pipe, and we were so like deep in that moment. And we all have those strange little snapshots in our heads, and we have them because at that moment my kids were 100% invested in sticks going in one end of the pipe and coming out the other, and who dared to crawl through the pipe first, right? That was the game. We're no longer there because we're adults, so we have things from our past that scar us, things in our future that worry us. So I thought that maybe we could really get deep on this by first of all talking, Rangan, about where we are as human beings, and also how we get back to that state that we were in as children. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I start off the book with that exact emotion, don't I? The introduction, I say, remember when you were a child. Remember, whatever it is, everyone listening to this will have a memory, something from childhood. For me, it's been barefoot on the grass. My older brother, we're sort of playing cricket against each other. I think I was saluting the imaginary crowd about the 50 I just scored in the garden. But you're in the moment. I see this with my kids. They're in the moment. What was my definition of high performance? Being present and in the moment. Well, kids have got that. You had that. I had that. We all had it. But we lose it. And I think a lot of that comes down to society and the way it conditions us. I call it in the book the adulthood contract that we sign. We think that, we get given this idea of success, that it's about, doing better than other people at school, right? I think that's when it starts. You're taught to compare yourself to others, whether schools want to or not. The result is, I got this grade. Oh, they did. I'm getting an award for that. And I grew up with all of that, but I see it in my kids now, and I think it's actually problematic because it sets you up for a definition of success that is not the same thing as happiness. So many of us think, we want. It's not that we want. We think that when we get a better job, a nicer car, we can go on a nicer holiday, we get a promotion, right? We think we're going to be happy. But what happens for many, many people is that they bust a gut to get all those things. They get those things, and then they realize, man, I still feel crap. I've still got that hole in my heart that hasn't plugged that hole like I thought it was going to. And I mean, I'm intrigued from you guys actually, because you talk to, incredible athletes, incredible people who have met society's definition of success, right? That's, I guess, in many ways why they're being invited onto the show, because, people go, they're successful, right? But how many of them, and, you may not know that from an hour chatting to them, but how many of them are truly happy? That's the question I've got, because I spoke to Pippa Grange on my podcast a couple of years ago now. Pippa was the psychologist with the England football team. Gareth Southgate brought her on. She was widely credited as being, one of the voices that led to the culture change in the England football team. She's got this beautiful concept called winning shallow or winning deep. And she talks about how many of these elite athletes or elite footballers would literally, they'd win the FA Cup, right? They'd be they'd pick up the trophy. From being a kid, they've been practicing, they've been working, they've been playing every weekend, training. They get it. And as they're walking down the stairs, they're feeling crap inside, right? It didn't plug that hole. I heard your conversation with Johnny Wilkinson. Johnny said, didn't he, when he won the World Cup, it's fleeting. That moment is fleeting. Within seconds of that, you've lost it. It's downhill. If that's the pinnacle of your career, if that's the pinnacle of your life, you've got a problem. Because if you do that in your 20s, what does that say about the rest of your life? So for me, the way I sort of frame it for people is it's about identity, right? Well, it's first of all understanding what is success, what is happiness. They can overlap, but they don't always. And there's a few things I think people can do to actually, define what happiness and success looks like for them. In fact, if you're up for it, there's a little exercise in the book I can try on you guys if you want.
Yeah, I'd love that.
It's I know this is not my podcast, but I think it's it's really quite a fun thing to do. So have a think about 3 things that bring you real happiness. What 3 things could you do each week that if you did them, you feel you'd be really happy?
So me, spending time with my children, walking my dog, and reading a good book.
Okay.
I would also have spending time with the kids is the first one. The second one is going to the gym with my wife. Like when we train together, it's brilliant fun. And finally getting the whole family together, the cousins, the aunts, the uncles, at my mum and dad's for a big meal.
Yeah, no, and I will love that. And then the second part of the exercise is, it's called write your happy ending, right? So you go to the end of your life, right? Imagine you're on your deathbeds. What 3 things would you have wanted to have done in life when you're lying there on your deathbed?
Wow.
Basically, I think I'll drop out the gym thing, but the more time with the kids, more time with the family. I can't think much beyond those 2, to be honest.
Yeah, exactly. It involves family.
And what's really interesting about that is it gives you this sort of microscopic day-to-day stuff, and it also gives you the big picture stuff. And actually, when you really go into the exercise sort of properly, you write down 3 things, and you write down 3 things at the end of your life, then you go back to the first one and go, okay, if I manage to do these 3 things each week, then I know I'm moving towards the happy ending that I want. Yeah, but for many people, when you do it, you realize, oh, wait a minute. Like at the end of my life, I want to talk about my relationships and my friends and my passions. I'm too busy with work. Like I'm working every weekend. I'm not home to see my kids Monday to Friday. And it's about intention. It's not about having a go at people, right? I understand life is tough. It's just about, and I think that's what high performance life is as well for me. It's an intentional life. It's you living life on your own terms because you've taken the time to define it. So what you both said about relationships as well in the context of happiness and high performance, I think is really, really interesting because there's this incredible study from Harvard. It's probably the longest running study we've got. It's been going on for over 75 years. And they've done it in, people who've got all the privilege in life who end up at Harvard, but they've also got people who don't go to Harvard who are from a more working class background. And it doesn't matter who you are or where you're from, the number one factor for your happiness is the quality of your relationships. Right? Nothing else comes close. So therefore, if we're talking about happiness, if we're talking about high performance, you have both said relationships, children, partners, friends, right? So the question then is, I would say the same thing, but I realized a few years ago, actually, you know what, Rangan, you can say that those things are important to you, but you're working so much that you never see them. So instead of beating myself up then, it's about going, okay, so how can I subtly shift something to kind of change that? And I tell you, one of my patients from a few years ago, I remember so well, and I think the story might resonate with your audience. 35-year-old chap came in to see me, felt a bit indifferent about life, feeling pretty low. And I was asking him about his life, and from the outside, right, this guy was crushing it. Good job, running his own business, right, making good money, driving a sports car, right? He's got all those external metrics of success. And maybe people are listening right now going, yeah, that's what I want. Right, but here's the thing. I asked him, because I was trying to figure out what's going on here. Why is he feeling so low? Why does he struggle to get out of bed some mornings? And I said, okay, how often do you see your friends? And he said, well, I'm sort of, I kind of see what they're up to on social media. I see them on Facebook and Instagram. I know what they're doing. No, I said, how often do you actually see them in real life? And he goes, I'm just too busy. I don't have time. And so I checked other things out, but the prescription I gave to him, I said, okay, listen, for the next 6 weeks, I want you to see your friends in person once a week. Now, he was lucky. He lived in the town where he grew up. So his friends actually lived nearby. He just never saw them. And I sent him away. He comes back 6 weeks later. He's like a different person. He bounces into the room. And I said, how are you feeling? He goes, Dr. Chatterjee, I feel great. I said, what happened? He goes, well, we started off on a Sunday morning. We'd go to the local cafe and catch up over a latte. And then after a few weeks, that led to us restarting playing five-a-side once a week. And essentially, I'm not exaggerating one iota here, he didn't have a serotonin deficiency, right? He didn't have an antidepressant deficiency. He had a friendship and relationship deficiency in his life, right? And he actually had the relationships. He was just too busy chasing success to actually nourish them. And his friends didn't know. And what he shared with me is he said, actually, my friends thought I was crushing it, right? And there's a whole chapter on this in the book. It's called Have Massless Conversations. It's about having those relationships where you can actually take off your masks and really be who you are. Like, because, we often perform at life, don't we? We show up and we put on a certain side of us so people think of us in a certain way. But who are those people in your life where you can be yourself, where you can take off the mask and you can share your vulnerabilities, your insecurities? And we know from research that is so nourishing for our health and our happiness.
See, what I love about that, though, is that, like that example of that guy that comes here, that doesn't cost anything, does it? You're not dispensing medicine, or you're not making expensive suggestions. You're just going to connect on a very human level.
I don't, wellness and well-being, people often say that it's the preserve of the middle class. And I passionately disagree with that. Sure, it might make it easier, no question. But I'm pretty proud that pretty much everything I ever recommend, whether it's in this book or my previous books, is either free or low cost and is accessible to everyone. And I take that seriously. I think it's the way I've been brought up. But it's also, I have seen affluent patients, I've seen poor patients, and, there's a common humanity that binds us all together. And I just want to help people, right? And I know if you can simplify messaging, if you can come up with, for me, I was challenged myself. Is that simple enough? Could you simplify that concept even more? I've realized that, I hope I've done it with this book, but I remember when I sat down to write my very first book 5 years ago, it's called The 4-Pillar Plan. I remember first week or two of writing, I was thinking, I really want doctors to like this. I want my peers to like this book. Yeah. And after a couple of weeks, I was like, Rangan, why are you writing this book? Are you writing it to help people or just to show off to your peers about how much you know? And I scrapped it. I thought, right, I'm starting from scratch. I want this book to help people. So I'm going to write this for the reader so it's helpful and actionable for them. Anytime I think I'm showing off, I'm trying to show people how much I know, look in the mirror, ask yourself, does that bit really need to be in, or are you doing that for your own ego?
See, because that throws up an interesting question that Jake and I were talking about before we met you, Rangan, about how important is being authentic now versus being accepted? Because that, like, when you're talking there about being accepted amongst your peers, that seems to be a driver 5 years ago, and now the message is very much about authenticity. Yeah,
I've totally changed. It's all about authenticity now, but what I call true authenticity, not performative authenticity. And I couldn't have written this book even 3 years ago because I've been very open about perceived failings in my life, insecurities that I've had. And I would have been too scared of what people would have thought of me. But for me, since my dad died in 2013, that was such a massive hole in my life for many reasons. Of course, losing a parent is always tricky. But I used to care for Dad, so I moved back to the Northwest. I was working in Edinburgh as a doctor. I moved back to help my mum and my brother care for Dad. So that was 15 years of my adult life, being a carer for Dad. So I lived 5 minutes away. And so when Dad died, that was a huge hole. And I had time for the first time in my adult life. I'd go walking, I'd go thinking. And really, I'd made so many changes since then, because I would question myself, whose life are you living? Are you living someone else's life, or are you living your own life? And really my quest more and more is, how can I really be me? Not perform at being me, not the version of me that I think other people want. How can I truly be me? And it's been a quest on my own podcast. I try very much to think, am I being the same person off the mic as on the mic? And it sounds like it would be the easiest thing in the world, right? Just be yourself. Why is it the hardest thing? Because as kids, we were ourselves, but somehow then we take on all this conditioning from society. And the truth is, I think for most of my life, I didn't feel good enough. I think there's something about maybe the immigrant mentality here, that I remember if I came home from school with 99%, my mum and dad would say, why didn't you get 100? If I got 19 out of 20, it's like, well, why didn't you get 20 out of 20? So to be really clear, I love my parents. They brought me up, I think, really, really well. This is not about criticizing them. This is about, what did I take from that I didn't realize? I think I took from that, if I'm not the best, if I'm not crushing it, if I'm not getting achievements, I'm not really loved. And I spoke to Mum about that, literally, because I wrote about this in the book, and I spoke to Mum about this a few months ago. I said, hey Mum, can I ask you, why did you ask me that? And she said, well, I knew you were capable. I wanted you to be the best that you could be. Now, you know what it's like when you get older, you have kids, you really start to kind of see your parents in a different light. Like, think, oh wow, how did you deal with those struggles? Like, I'm a similar age, that sort of thing. It's really interesting. And from their perspective, they've come to a foreign country, the UK. They're facing discrimination in various ways. Their way of their kids not having to face that was to crush it at school. That's why education is such a massive thing for lots of immigrant families. It's like, if you do well, if you get A grades, you go to a good university, you won't have to face what we faced. So I love them. I understand. She says, look, we didn't do that with your brother because your brother's different from you, but we did it with you because we know you're capable. But I took that as being, I'm not good enough unless I be someone who I'm not. And I've only realized in the last years how toxic that has been for me. I think for much of my life, I won shallow. I didn't win deep. Like I remember at uni, I was at uni in Edinburgh, and sometimes on a Sunday, you've been partying Friday, Saturday night. On a Sunday, we'd go to this place called Diane's Pool Hall in Edinburgh. I'd go with one of my best mates. And if I was ever losing, I'm a pretty decent player. If I was ever losing, like, I'd go into the toilets, I'd go and look at myself in the mirror, I'd hit myself on the cheek. I'd say, come on, Chatterjee, come on, get back out there. Well, I'd go there, and more often than not, I'd go and win. But what's really interesting is that it was quite a shallow win. I've realized it wasn't that I wanted to win, it's just that the pain of losing was too great. Does that make sense?
Because what was it that you felt losing would say about you?
I had tied winning up with my identity, right? So, and this is where I think many of us fall into a trap, whether it's success, whether it's winning, whether it's your job, right? What's your identity? So I think identity is really key for all of us to ask ourselves, and I think it comes down to values. So because my identity was tied up in winning. If I win, life's great. If I lose, life's just not a little bit bad. Life's awful. Right, and I think then you spiral into what I call junk happiness in the book. Junk happiness is, there's something wrong with junk happiness, but junk happiness is the sort of things that we think happiness are. So, half a bottle of wine, trip down to the casino, chocolate bar. I'm not saying those things are bad, but if you're engaging in them too often and you think that's what's making you happy, I think that's potentially a problem. So I've done a lot of work on my identity. I don't even identify anymore as a father or as a doctor.
Go on.
And I think that surprises people. So I think identities can be limiting for us. So if I say I'm a doctor and I'm a father, and to be clear, I'm very proud of both of those things, then what happens? Let's say I get fired from a job as a doctor. Let's say I get sick and I can't work. If my identity is wrapped up in being a doctor, I've got a problem. I'll start to feel worthless. As a father, right? If who I am as a father, then what happens when my kids leave home, right? What happens if my kids shout at me when they're teenagers and we have a row and they say, you're a crap father, right? This happens. I've got patients like this where they feel worthless because their whole identity is wrapped up in that. So those are roles that I play. They're not who I am. And what I think is a useful exercise for everyone is to, in the book I call it the identity menu, where you go through, I've listed about 15 values or so. It's not an exhaustive list,
Yep.
but really try and identify what are your core values. So for me, I've done this exercise on many occasions. My 3 core values are integrity, curiosity, and compassion. And those are the values I try and bring into everything I do. So when I'm a father, am I living by those values? When I'm a doctor, am I living by those values? When I'm on the High Performance podcast, interacting with you two, am I living by those values? Because then if I am, that's what I can take around with me in my back pocket, no matter what happens in life. Did that make sense?
But what I'm intrigued about then, Rangan, is how did you identify them? So how anyone listening to this could go through that process of identifying what are their 3 core values?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think how I did it was, this wasn't just like a one hit where I just sat down and go, what are my 3 core values? This was a constant process of self-inquiry, asking myself questions, like regularly asking myself, do these values sit with me? Reassess a few weeks later, go, not sure. It's asking a lot of questions. One of the things that's really helped me, and I think it's really helped me with my values, is this idea that I call seek out friction. So, in fact, I've got to say, I think this is probably the thing that's had the most impact on my happiness over the past few years, if not over my entire life. And it's look for friction in day-to-day life and use it as your teacher. So, I don't know, let's say you get an email from your boss or a colleague that pisses you off, right? Okay, you could take the opinion that they should send me an email differently. They should use better tone in their email, right? But then you make yourself a prisoner because ultimately you now are dependent on how people around you are behaving for your happiness in order for you to feel good. So I would say flip it. In that moment, go, okay, what can I learn about myself here? What is it that's been triggered in me, right? Why am I getting bothered? Because one thing I've learned, mate, is that, and I've learned this because I've been through it, when you get to that place where you are truly secure in who you are, I'm not always there. I'm better than I was. I've still got some ways to go. But when you're truly secure in who you are, what other people do, it doesn't really bother you. Like the praise doesn't go to your head and artificially elevate your ego like it might have done in the past. But the criticism also doesn't take you down and make you feel worthless, because you're responsible for your feelings. So I use that every day. If something happens and I get triggered, I'm like, why did that trigger me? Is it because I'm knackered and I haven't slept? Is it because actually they've got a point? Because sometimes, you know what it's like,
It's not about being blind to the potential criticism or the issues you've got, is it?
Yeah, it's about being honest.
Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
And I think, in the wider concepts of high performance, I think one of the problems, and this links to authenticity, is I think many of us are walking around not knowing who we really are. Right? We're trying to live up to society's definition of success. We're in the rat race. We're so busy trying to do more, be more, acquire more, get more, that we don't know how to simply be and be ourselves. And I think that's the big ticket journey for high performance, for happiness, is, are you living a truly authentic life? I really think that's what it's about.
Is there an argument, though, that we have to go through a period of confusion and not knowing and self-doubt? Because, you're a similar age to me. You're 41?
44.
44. I think that I wouldn't have been able to host this podcast 5 years ago because I did not feel confident enough to have a conversation about high performance, because my concern was I'd be judged by other people. So that was the issue. And then I look at kids, and we spoke about them at the very beginning. Well, they've got no issue because they are just totally and utterly authentic. Sebastian said the other day, I want to be a rock star, but he says it in a way that it's literally going to happen. And that's wonderful, isn't it? Because they just believe it. So do you feel that people have to go through the decade or maybe 2 decades of confusion from, let's say, 18 to 38 till you hit your 40s, where life is hard and life is tricky, and there'll be people listening to this that are right in the middle of that now, probably?
It's something I think about a lot, Jake, this idea that, can you learn this stuff without having to go through it? We think about that as parents, don't we? We want to protect our kids from having to go through the hard times, even though we probably
all... The only way they're going to learn is by letting them go through the hard times.
Exactly. If we think about our own lives, I think, speaking for myself, adversity is when I learnt the most. Adversity is what has taught me probably the most powerful learnings in my life. So I think on some level, yes, I really do. I as a doctor, I think about this all the time. Why does it take someone for their partner to die or them to have a heart attack before they want to follow the advice that they knew before, but they needed that? So I think you're right. I think there's an element of that, but I don't think we necessarily have to go to the extremes. I think we can learn some of these things. And I hope, I'm sure people are finding this already when they listen to your show regularly, that the lessons they keep learning week after week, I'm sure are helping shift their perspective. We didn't have podcasts when we grew up, right? We didn't have access to all this incredible information just at the tip of our fingertips. So, I don't feel it was that easy to learn this stuff. Whereas you probably got teenagers now listening to the podcast, learning this stuff, going, oh, wow, hold on a minute. Johnny Wilkinson, he won the World Cup, and then it was downhill in his emotions straight after that. Oh, wow, I wouldn't have thought that. I would have thought that would be a pinnacle. I'm trying to practice every day after school because I think that's going to make me happy. Even just putting that awareness into people early, I feel means that they will turn the ship around earlier. Did that make sense?
Yeah. Well, there was a brilliant study, wasn't there, about in your world, Rangan, around doctors, that when they explained about cancer cells that were being attacked by chemotherapy, and people didn't necessarily understand what chemotherapy did, whereas when they told the story about a castle, that was effectively the cancer, and it was about the knights coming in to attack the castle, and that was how they released it. Just the very fact of using stories and metaphors allowed people to understand what their treatment was, and therefore they got better quicker because they had that sense of connection with it.
Connection's key, isn't it? It's part of what I do in work is I teach doctors, so we don't really get taught much about nutrition and lifestyle at medical school at all. And I've created this Royal College GP accredited course where we teach thousands of doctors and healthcare professionals how you do this. And once at the course, someone asked me, what's the biggest thing you've learnt in your years of practice? I said, the biggest thing I've learnt are these 4 words: connect first, educate second. And I kind of feel that holds true for all of us in every aspect of life. Whenever I've got a patient in front of me, my number one goal at the start is, how can I connect with this person? How can I use my body language? How can I look at them? How can I make sure they feel heard and seen? Only once I've done that do I then move on to the education part of, helping them understand what they need to do. Because if you think you're too busy and you fast track connection and go straight to education, it doesn't work.
Wasn't there a study done, and you'll either correct me or verify it, in America, where they looked at doctors that were sued the most versus doctors that had the lowest level of litigation? And the difference was those that got sued the most had a 15-minute appointment time. The ones that had lowest levels, their appointment times were 18 and a half minutes. So that connection was at 3.5 minutes.
Connection's key. But that's the doctor-patient relationship. But what we're talking about a relationship, right? Yeah. Any relationship in life, think about with your wives, right? Do you want to go straight to more, they want to, this is not male or female or, people's husbands or partners. People want to feel heard first. They want to feel heard. And I think that's what we're missing. As we get busier and busier, we're rushing around, we miss out that piece, but it's the most important piece. It's what makes us human. Can you be a high performance individual without having high levels of connection in your life? I don't think you can. I really don't think you can. And Jay, you asked me at the start about society and where does it go, not where does it go wrong, but what happens to the kids?
Yeah.
Another thing which, maybe I'm sharing because I know your sort of past guest list. I think there's something about heroes that's problematic in society that I've been thinking a lot about recently. I think we worship the wrong heroes. And the example I'd give is, if I take my own life, I've loved sport my entire life. I'd put people on a pedestal. Man, I love Tiger Woods, right? Literally, as a teenager, I wouldn't play golf. I wouldn't be interested in golf if Tiger didn't exist. It just wasn't a part of my upbringing, a part of my culture. Golf would not have even been on my radar without Tiger Woods, right? So I put him on a pedestal. And then, it's been very well documented, the fall from grace that Tiger had. And I think we worship the wrong heroes, because here's the thing, we put people like Tiger on a pedestal, and we think, I want to be like Tiger. Look at him, the way he holds those birdie putts. Look at the way he drives, But here's the thing, it has very little relevance for any one of us, because very few of us have 8 hours a day to practice, right? It's a false comparison. We're like, no, I want to be able to do that. Oh, Tiger does that little stinger down the fairway. I want to be able to do that. It's like, okay, hold on a minute. Great, sure, go and practice. But if you put him on a pedestal and then suddenly you saw the outpouring of the anger, the animosity towards him, right? He's just a flawed human being, just like you, just like me, right? If you look at his upbringing, you look at everything that happened, of course it was going to happen. No social life, no girlfriends, his dad shouting racist abuse at him to train him for when he's going to get it on the course. Of course, at some point, that's going to blow up. So we need to worship that component, say, actually, I worship his golf swing. Even if you want to worship anything, which we can say is challenging in and of itself, but if you want to worship Tiger, you've got to worship every part of him. You've got to worship also the painkiller addiction, the broken marriage, the depression, the real inner demons. And so these days, and this is literally in the last years, who do I worship these days? My father-in-law. Right, I tell you, that has more relevance for my life than worshiping Tiger. I'm a huge fan of Tiger still, right? I don't judge people, right? He did what he did. I'm in no position to judge him. It's a big thing in my life is that I don't judge people. If I find myself falling into that trap, I pull back and go, why are you judging? Right, we love to judge people, especially at the moment. But I think judgment for most of us comes from a feeling of inadequacy in ourselves. Yeah. So we like to put them down a little bit to make us feel a bit better. But again, you're putting yourself in a prison. But my father-in-law, if I go back to values, my 3 core values are integrity, compassion, and curiosity. Well, Does Tiger have anything to do with my 3 core values? He may do, he may not. But the point is, my father-in-law does, because I've never, ever, how long have we been married for now? I think 14 years, I should know. I think it's 14 years. I've never once seen him raise his voice. I've never once seen him where he hasn't had the most warm, delightful smile that makes everyone in the room feel better. And I think, well, if you want to live by values, Rangan, that guy, that should be your hero. Do you know what I mean? So I think these societal things about, because people will, let's take the podcast. They'll look at Steven Gerrard, Frank Lampard, all these incredible people who've done incredible things. I'm not saying we shouldn't worship them. I'm not saying you shouldn't look at their skills and go, if you want to play football, go and practice them. But I think there is a problem with the level of hero worship.
Yep.
Do you know what I mean?
It reminds me of that lovely story that Michael Johnson tells. Do you remember the athlete in the
400 metre runner?
400 metre runner.
Yeah, go on.
And he wrote a book called Slaying the Dragon, I think it was. And he tells a story once he was having dinner with somebody, and somebody came over and asked him for an autograph, and he said, "No, I'm having dinner. I'm sorry, you're not interrupting me. We're having a private dinner." And the lady said, "You're a disgrace. My young son over there is heartbroken." And his point was, well, "Why are you putting me on a pedestal? I've not asked to do it. But what you've role modelled is rudeness, lack of grace, indiscretion in that one interaction of asking me for the autograph. And you're a more significant figure in your child's life than I am." And I think you're making that point there.
Exactly. And I grew up in Manchester, and obviously football was a big part of teenage years. I remember, you'd see all these footballers who you idolise, suddenly they'd be on the front page of a tabloid with, whatever might have been going on. Yeah. And we'd love to tear them down. I think now, as a father, as someone who really tries to live with this value of compassion, I think, well, how many people, if they were earning tens of thousands of pounds a week at the age of 18, staying in 5-star hotels, having, let's say you're stereotypically a guy, and there's lots of people throwing themselves at you, right, every weekend, how many people would also succumb to some of the things that the footballers do? Well, I think it's probably most people or many people, but we like to think we wouldn't. And we like to think, people aren't putting a microscope on our lives. And another phrase that it sort of speaks to what I was talking about seeking out friction before, about how can you use a bit of social friction to learn something about yourself. If you're struggling, and I really would urge everyone listening to try this for 7 days. Anytime you feel you're judging someone or they're pissing you off in some way, ask yourself, or say this to yourself, if I were them, I'd be doing exactly the same thing.
So can I jump in there? Because
Please.
My wife loves your podcasts, and she gave me a line from one of your guests on it where I was complaining about something. This is a couple of years ago. And she said, if I was them, I would have made exactly the same decision. And it was life-changing for us. So I'm just jumping in to advocate. It's such a powerful
It's so powerful, because what it means, right, if you really get it, it's like if I was that person with their childhood, with their parents, with their childhood experiences, with their work, with their social media feeds, I would be making exactly the same decision. I'd be acting in exactly the same way. And if you think you wouldn't, I would politely suggest that it's our ego talking. Right? Because if we were, if they could do it any other way, they would. Now, it doesn't mean that means we need to accept behavior that's, that we don't like. It's not about that. It's about understanding that their view of the world. Look, we both had John McAvoy, right? We've both had John McAvoy on the show. I think I've had John about 3 times now. I love John because there's very few people I find talk with the authenticity that guy does. And I think that's because of where he's been and what he's been through. But when you hear John's story from childhood, you totally get why he ended up in prison. I'm convinced that if I grew up like John, I'd have 2 life sentences and be in prison, right? And 15 years ago, you'd see someone like John McAvoy and you'd say, lock him up, throw away the key. And now he's probably, one of the most incredible people I know. I would happily leave him at home alone with my kids looking after them. Like, genuinely, the guy's incredible. And it just goes to the power of judgments and do you know what I mean? It's
Yeah. Well, I assumed when we met him, I thought, well, I'm not going to like this guy because he's just a criminal. And then we had Loco on a while ago, and he was a gang leader in Brixton, and he's now doing amazing things as a businessman. And again, if you just have an opinion of him, you would say, well, why would you put him on a high performance podcast? Because he indulged in gang violence. But that allows for no empathy or no understanding of his story and who he was. And I think that, we talk about putting people on pedestals. I totally agree with that. I think it's still brilliant to hear from sports people about the mindset and the determination, the consistency, because we can all learn from that. But I think instead of having anyone right up high and other people down low, we should endeavour to have less opinion of other people and more knowledge and more understanding and more empathy of them and their story. And then we can actually make a considered judgment about maybe this footballer is someone I would put on my idol list because I know them, I understand what they've been through, and an armed robber can be on the same list as a top level athlete. They can be in the same place.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Jake. And I think, you guys know this because you also have a weekly podcast, but when you dive deep with people and you hear their story, you have a deep level of empathy and compassion. And you realize also, I think this is, very much in keeping with what we've been talking about, this idea that happiness, it really is how you approach the world, right? The goal of all my work, in whatever form it is that I want people to feel as though they can be the architects of their own health and happiness. I don't want someone's happiness to be dependent on the world around them, right? That doesn't mean I don't think the world around them has an influence. Of course it does. But you can shift your mindset so that in every situation you have a choice. I know you also love Viktor Frankl's Man for Meaning, in Man's Search for Meaning. And, between stimulus and response is a space. And it's that space. In that space is our power to choose our response. And with our response, or with that choice, lies our growth and freedom. That's it for me. That is it. When you understand, as hard as it is, you get to choose how you respond in every situation. That's freedom. That's freedom. This will interest you guys. There's a study done on a football match, right? An incident happened, and both sets of fans were watching it. And this I think really speaks to what is truth. An incident happens, and depending on who you were supporting, you saw that incident completely differently, right? We all know that feeling.
Yep.
It's like, you'll say that was a foul, that was a yellow card. The other say, no, you didn't touch him, right? Same incident. Two people have got their idea of truth. I think that applies to, let's say two partners having a row. Let's say the stereotypical marital row. Well, you know what? Both people, depending on what side you sit on, have got a completely different view of the same situation. So what does that teach us? It means that any given situation has multiple realities, has multiple stories. So my philosophy in life is always choose the happiness story, right? If you want to be happy.
I like that.
Right? If you want to be happy, choose the happiness story. You could see a situation and make yourself the victim. You could say, oh man, it always happens to me. I can't believe it. Hey, and I say that with compassion. Or you can shift it and go, no, okay, I'm going to choose a different story here, right? The example I think I give in the book is, let's say in April 2020, first lockdown in the UK comes in. There's all these things about loo roll shortages on the news. People go, I can't believe people are doing this. How mean, right. You can tell yourself that story. You're completely welcome to. But what happens then? You create stress in your body. You create tension. Oh man, I can't believe people are like that. Or you can go, actually, I'm going to choose a happiness story here. Okay, maybe everyone who went to the shop that day just bought one extra. And actually, at the end of the day, the shelves were empty. Or maybe that guy who came up with a trolley with 16 packs of toilet roll, maybe they're a carer for their grandparents and their parents, or maybe they work in a nursing home. Maybe they had to get loads. Or maybe, someone is really, really poor. They don't have much money. I thought, actually, this is a great opportunity, right? As much as we may think, oh, what a low life thing to do, right? Because people will judge that. But when you look at it from the other side, you go, actually, do you know what?
What is the benefit to us thinking?
What's the benefit?
Yeah.
That's the point. It doesn't matter what's true. If you want to be happy, choose the happiness story.
It's brilliant.
Love that. It's almost being, did they call it pronoia as opposed to being paranoid? Being pronoid is you see everyone is out to help you. That idea that...
Yeah, I didn't know that, but I love it. I love it.
What can be bad in that? If you just... And people will go, oh, you've been unrealistic. So what? If it makes you feel good and makes you happy.
You say, Jake, it's unrealistic. I know... Here's the thing about this stuff, right? And this is the whole point of the book, really, is to show you happiness is a trainable skill, right? You can get good at happy. But when did we learn how to be happy, right? Did we get taught it at school? I certainly didn't. Did I get taught it by my parents? Absolutely not. Did I get taught it by society? No. But actually, there are some simple things that you can do that don't cost money, that you can do every day, right? And little by little, you get better at it. So, writing a happiness story, you might find it hard straight away. Practice it week on week. You'll find in 2 months, you are transformed as a person.
Society's busy telling us that it's written already. Oh, you're not the sort of person that's going to be happy. Those things aren't going to go your way. That's the issue, is that we're constantly, I think, battling against all the things we've discussed on this podcast that makes people think happiness is out of my control. And therefore, they're waiting for happiness. Therefore, it never comes. And it's difficult.
Sorry, go on, Damien.
No, go on. I was going to say that what you're saying, that there was another interview we did that what you're saying is just for anyone listening was reinforced with when we interviewed Robin Van Persie.
Yeah.
And he described how he wrote what was called a Xander letter.
Yeah, I read it in your book.
Yeah. So, but he talks about where he wanted to view his career and be happy at the end of it. So, I think I'm just reinforcing what you're saying for anyone listening to this to think this is best practice that's been adopted.
And I think with happiness, the other thing which I think is really important to understand, because it's almost becoming a bit uncool now to talk about happiness. It's like, we shouldn't be chasing happiness. It's about meaning. It's about purpose. And I spent weeks thinking about this when writing about it. I thought, how can I unpick that? And I think one of the big problems is, again, going back to Jake, what you're saying kind of at the start about these kind of societal conditioning.
Yes.
We get sold an image of what happiness is, right? We think happiness is having a smile on your face, being out on the beach with the waves behind you, with your family in tow, right? We're told that that's happiness. That's pleasurable, but I don't think that's necessarily happiness. That can be part of a happy life. And I've got this sort of new definition of happiness that I call core happiness. And I've designed it so that people can think of it as something they can strengthen and work on over time. So just as if you want bigger biceps, right? Go to the gym, do bicep curls every day, your biceps are going to get bigger. Well, I contend that if you work on these 3 legs of the core happiness stool, day after day, week after week, you are going to become happier. The 3 legs are alignment, which is when the person who you want to be and the person you are being out there in the world are one and the same. It's basically when your values and actions match up.
So that question you asked us earlier about
exactly,
yeah.
Exactly. So that's alignment. Yeah. The second leg is control. So this is not about controlling the world that is inherently uncontrollable. It's about giving yourself a sense of control. Right? So what little things can you do each day that give you a sense of control?
Well, your reaction to the world is a good one.
Absolutely. And as you wrote in your book, you quoted the same study that scientists have shown that people who have a strong sense of control over their lives are happier, they make more money, they have better relationships, they have longer relationships, they have less stress. So even though the world is uncontrollable, what things can you do to give yourself a feeling of control?
Wasn't there that other study as well, Rangan, around people in hospitals that when they gave them a plant to look after, because they had the control of water in it, had a significant impact on their recovery rates because they felt they had something within there.
And I think that's one thing as medics, as doctors, I think one thing we've not been very good at is we label people and we take their autonomy and agency over their lives away from them. One thing I've learned in medicine, people need to feel that they have some agency over what they're doing, even if they've got a bad diagnosis and they're on medications. If I can say, yeah, if you can go for a 20-minute walk each day, that's going to help A, B, and C. If you can do some meditation, 5 minutes a day, that will help with your pain, for example. Yep. You see their body language change. It's like, okay, great. So I've got this thing, but now these are the little things that I can do. It's so important in many aspects of our life. We need to have a sense of control. And that third leg is contentment. It's about feeling calm and at peace with your life and your decisions. And basically, once you understand that core happiness stool, which took me months to come up with, because you come up with all this stuff and you try, how can I simplify something so it is so actionable for people? You can look at various things in your life and go, how does that work on my core happiness stool? Does that strengthen that leg or does it kind of cut that leg in half? I tell you, when you're not being authentic to who you are, you pretty much cut all 3 legs off that stool straight away because you're being someone who you're not. You can't hide from yourself. If you value integrity and integrity and being kind, if you've acted in a way that's not that. So I think it's I think it's really, really important. But it's not that hard.
Yep.
It really isn't. And so, we're talking about meaning and purpose. Where that fits in is, I think meaning and purpose is a necessary ingredient for happiness, but it's not happiness in and of itself.
Yep.
So meaning and purpose comes under the alignment leg. And why I'm so passionate about this, have you heard of the Japanese concept of Icky Guy?
Yes, yeah.
No.
Jake, you'd love it. You'd literally love it. This is this cultural concept in Japan. So what we should be looking for is our Icky Guy, and it's 4 things. When you do something that you're good at,
Yeah.
when you do something that the world needs,
Yep.
when you do something that you enjoy, and you do something that makes you money.
Right.
Right? So,
And you have to have all those 4 things at the same time.
that's the goal.
Right.
Right? So
It's like a Venn diagram.
it's a Venn diagram. It's lovely. And I would imagine, I can't speak for you guys, of course, but I would imagine doing the podcast might...
Yeah. Run me through the 4 again.
Something you're good at,
Yep.
something that you enjoy doing, something that the world needs,
Yep.
and something that gives you money.
I think we hit 3 out of 4 on this podcast.
But I tell you why that's so important, right? It's a Japanese concept. And I remember I wrote about this in my second book, The Stress Solution. I was on stage in London about a few days after the book came out. And I was taking Q&A at the end of the talk. And I remember back right of the arena, this hand went up. And this student in London said, "Hi, Dr Chatterjee. I'm an 18-year-old Japanese student. I grew up with this concept of Icky Guy, and I actually found it off-putting. I found it too much pressure. I thought, how am I ever going to achieve this mythical Icky Guy?" Right? And I really thought about that when trying to unpick meaning, purpose, and happiness. And this is where I've got to. It's about alignment, right? If you figure out what your core values are and you live each day in accordance with those values, you get meaning and purpose as a byproduct, right? So let's say someone's listening to this, they're working in a call center, right? Let's say they don't enjoy the job, but one of their values is kindness, right? If they, on the way to work and they stop off in the coffee shop and they're kind to the barista, if when they get to work, they're kind to their work colleagues, if on the way back, they're kind to the bus driver who takes them home, you know what? Yeah, you may not enjoy your job. You may want to change that, but you're living in alignment. You are living with meaning because you're living in accordance. So I think that's how I've tried to crack it.
And it's still about looking for those things.
Yeah.
Rather than saying to ourselves, well, I can't possibly be that because this is my job, this is my life, this is where I live. Whatever the issue is, they're blockers rather than...
And you'll find it, you'll get the meaning and purpose. It will come. So, and sadness, can you be sad and happy? Yeah, you can, right? If you're feeling sad, if someone's died, right, you're not feeling good and you're feeling sad, what's toxic is when you try and pretend you're feeling good. You're not aligned then. You're kidding yourself. Inside, you're crying, and on the outside, you're trying to say, "Oh, I'm fine." It's like, no. Well, if you can get aligned, it's like, no, I'm in grief. I'm struggling.
I think that's so powerful, Rangan. I think that because again, like one of the criticisms that we sometimes get on here is that we're teaching the world to paint a smile on the face when everything's going wrong, that shit happens and you've got to pretend it's great, and that sort of toxic happiness is something that you're articulating is a powerful thing. You can be sad and still content, can't you?
Totally. And I think sadness is a natural human emotion. And no matter how good our lives might be or might appear to be, we're all going to have times where we feel sad. That's okay.
We're about to move on to our quickfire questions, but there's one thing I really want to make clear for people listening to this. If they've listened to this whole thing and they think that sounds great, but I'm kind of busy, or I've got young kids, or I've started a new job, so I'm just going to delay my quest for happiness for another year, another couple of years, another 5 years. Research shows happiness and health are linked absolutely clearly. Happier people live longer, live healthier.
Yeah.
And they do the same things as the unhappy people, but the happiness is what keeps them alive. I think people need to know that.
Yeah, Jay, you've made such a great point. And that really was, why would I, as a doctor for 20 years, why would I be writing a book on happiness? Why is a doctor writing a book on happiness? Well, for years I've been saying that 80% of what we see as doctors is in some way related to our collective modern lifestyles, and I absolutely stand by that. And so I've always spoken to people about what I call these 4 pillars of health: food, movement, sleep, and relaxation. And when we make small changes in each of those 4 areas, we have huge impacts on our health and well-being, no matter what our starting point is. But a few years ago, I started to wonder, well, why is it that some people can make those changes? Why do some people make those changes for a few weeks and then they flip back? Could there be something that's even more important than these lifestyle changes? And I think it is. It's happiness and it's well-being. And, I very much resonated with your book, guys, when you started off and said, we're going to talk about mindset first, right? That's the first part of the book, right? Yep. It's mindset. Because mindset, you get that right, everything else afterwards becomes so much easier. And the research shows this so clearly. Happiness and health are linked. Why is that? A couple of quick reasons to explain to people. Number one, when you feel happier and more content with who you are, you find it easier to make healthy lifestyle choices, right? If you feel really content with your day and the state of your life, you are less likely to dive into a tub of Ben & Jerry's that evening in front of television, or drown your stresses or sorrows in half a bottle of wine that evening. Yeah. Right? You're less likely to feel the need for doing that because you're not trying to use it to medicate the way that you're feeling. Right? So that's one reason why. But the other reason, there was this really famous study called the Nun Study.
Oh, yeah.
And they looked at these nuns, and they basically, when they matched them, they had the same lifestyle behaviors, same good diet, same exercise routine, same amount of sleep.
Because we're all in the same convent, weren't they?
Exactly.
So
Even when that was all matched, the happier nuns lived significantly longer.
It was nearly 7 years, wasn't it? Yeah.
Exactly. So happiness and health are absolutely intertwined. And for people who are saying, I'll do it next year, right, I'm too busy at the moment, my challenge would be, I'm not asking you to overhaul your life. I'm not asking you to leave your job. I'm not asking you to create loads of free time to engage in your passions. I'm asking you, maybe take one small thing that you've heard on the show today. Anything. Maybe it was, if you were them, you'd be doing the same thing. Maybe it's, you're going to look for periods of social friction. Every time you get triggered, you're just going to say, oh, why did that trigger me? Right? You can do that alongside your life, right? And I promise you, it's like a ripple effect. You start with one small thing, you do it consistently. Within weeks, you will feel like a different person, and it will radiate to everyone around you. So don't wait. Life is happening to you now. Start now.
Brilliant. What a powerful episode. Happy Mind, Happy Life is the book that Rangan has written. Thank you so much for coming and sharing some amazing lessons from that book with us. Are you ready for your quickfire questions?
I am ready.
Some of these you may well have shared with us already. 3 non-negotiable behaviours that you and the people around you must buy into.
3 non-negotiables that people around me must buy into. Can I just reframe that?
Definitely, I thought you might.
Again, this is where it gets different, having this conversation in 2022 as opposed to having it in 2015. I would have answered that straight out 7 years ago. But that bit must buy into. If I feel that someone around me must buy into something, I make myself a prisoner because I'm dependent on them buying into something. They have to behave in a certain way. They have to get this part about me, because if they don't, it's going to be problematic for me. So I no longer need anyone around me to buy into what I do. But in terms of what I consider to be the intention behind that question, I'm interpreting that as, are there 3 things that I try and do each day that maybe are really important for my health and happiness? Is that an accurate?
It's almost like stuff that you wouldn't compromise on yourself.
For me, I'd say it's my morning routine. And that actually has 3 components to it. And why that's so important for me is it gives me an opportunity to be with myself and to gain perspective on my life. In the new book, I call it, go on holiday every day, right? And what I mean by that is we all love to go on holiday, right? So what is it that a holiday gives us? Like, we think it's the sun and the beach and the drinks and the cocktails, but, we enjoy those things. But I think a big thing that holidays give us is perspective. Even when you get on that plane and you're just taking off, you suddenly have literally and metaphorically that 30,000 foot view on your life. You can see all the little things you're worrying about, and you just put it in, you manage to put it in its proper context. And what I want people to understand is you don't have to wait for that 1 week a year to get a holiday from your life. You can take a holiday every single day. It could be just 10 minutes where you tune out of your life, you step outside to gain perspective and reflect. It could be a walk around the block. It could be picking up your guitar. It could be doing a jigsaw, whatever, right? For me, it's my morning routine. So I get up early.
What time?
Now, I'm not saying people need to do this, but I get up between 4:30 and 5 every morning. And I do that because I know I'm a better human being when I've had time to myself, and my kids have always got up early. So since I became a dad, I've been moving my bedtime earlier and earlier, and I get up earlier and earlier. So I get up in the morning, and I do roughly about half an hour now of a morning routine. It's got 3 M's: mindfulness, movement, mindset. Mindfulness, what does that look like for me? Either some meditation or some breath work, right? I've got various things that I do, but I start off the day. I don't get literally in my pajamas, come downstairs, do a bit of meditation or breath work. Then what do? I make myself coffee. So I've got a routine, right? I make coffee, I weigh out 15 grams, I'm pretty particular with it,
Right.
Pour in the water, and then it brews for 5 minutes. In those 5 minutes, I don't go on Instagram, I don't go on my emails. I do a 5-minute workout in my kitchen, right? So I'm in my pajamas, I make it easy to do. If you make things hard, you don't do them. So I make it easy. I've got a kettlebell there, I've got a dumbbell. I'll do a 5-minute workout, and then I get the beautiful reward of a hot cup of coffee that I've made just the way I like it. And then I'll do something for my mindset. So I've got, some books kicking around in my living room. I'll just pick one up. I might read a few pages, a few chapters. If my daughter gets up early, and sometimes she knows that daddy's doing him and will come in just when I'm on that final M, instead of reading, if my daughter's there, we'll do affirmations together. So we just sit there, hold hands, and we say, I'm happy, I'm calm, I'm stress-free. I'm happy, I'm calm, I'm stress-free. And we say these affirmations for about a minute, and then, I feel like $1 million at the end. She's got a big smile on her face. And that's what I try and do every morning. And on the days where I think I'm too busy, I think, you know what, I can't do it today. Got to get onto the emails, got to do this. I always feel it later. I'm not as productive. I find my focus wandering. I'm a bit more snappy. So in terms of those 3 non-negotiables,
The 3 M's.
I would say it's the 3 M's that I do every morning. And I would just want to say for people who think I don't have half an hour in the morning, I've been using these 3 M's with patients for years. I want to remember this single mum who was really struggling with her skin, right? Really bad skin. And I felt stress was really playing a big role and really driving a lot of it. I persuaded her to do a 5-minute morning routine 5 minutes. She did 1 minute of what's called the 3-4-5 breath, when you breathe in for 3, hold for 4, breathe out for 5. She did 2 minutes of some of her favorite yoga moves, and she did 2 minutes of affirmations, right? So she did the 3 M's in 5 minutes. Within weeks, her skin problems had gone down by about 50%, right? And I've seen this over and over again. So what I'm saying is that even if you feel you're busy, I think a little practice first thing in the morning, even if it's just 5 minutes, to ground you and center you, will pay dividends for health, happiness, and high performance.
Brilliant. Love that. If you could go back to one moment in your life, Rangan, when would it be and why?
The moment that's coming up for me, I don't know why this is coming up at the moment, but I'd go back to March 2013 when my dad died. And I was there with Dad when he died. I was with him holding his right hand. My mum was holding his left hand. And I literally got to witness and feel over the course of 10 hours someone breathing, someone with life in them, little by little, until the life was no longer there. And, you know, I don't think I really understood how powerful that was in that moment. But it was incredible to actually experience what is it to be alive. What does it feel like? There's still a body there in front of me. Remember that the hour after Dad died, my brother wasn't there. He came in a cab to the hospital. And we were just sitting there, the three of us. Dad's lying on the bed. Dad's dead. But it was almost like an hour and a half of where it wasn't really happening. We were all chatting as if Dad was still alive. And why did that moment come up just now? I don't know. But in some ways, if I could go back there and really try and experience that with more presence, I think that's the moment I choose.
Wow. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Would there be one book or one podcast that you would recommend our listeners dive into that maybe was life-changing for you?
Off my own or other ones?
Either.
There's so many great books and podcasts out there. It's very hard to choose one. But maybe because I'm feeling emotional at the moment, but the conversation I keep getting drawn to is Edith Eger, the 93-year-old lady who miraculously survived Auschwitz and now has the most kindness, compassion, and spirit of forgiveness that I've ever come across. She's got some great books, The Gift, The Choice, which I'd highly recommend. I have a very, very powerful conversation with her on my own show, where we talk for about 90 minutes, probably one of the most life-changing conversations I've had. I think about the conversation every day, but she's been on, anywhere you can watch Edith Eger speak, I don't think you'll be disappointed.
I think if I can jump in on that one, Rangan, I remember listening to that, and I also remember being really aware of your humility just to stand down and let her speak, didn't you? I thought it was incredibly powerful.
When you're around someone like that, it's like, what on earth have I possibly got to offer? You have got such wisdom. And, if people struggle with letting go and forgiving people, I tell you, if Edith Eger can forgive the prisoners in Auschwitz and what happened to her, I think most of us can probably forgive the things that we struggle with in our lives.
And the final question, what's your one golden rule to live a high-performance life?
One golden rule: be curious, be the learner. In every situation in life, it's not about being right or wrong. Once you let go of that need to be right, you will find a sense of peace and freedom on the other side. Always ask yourself, what can I learn here? And I think for me, it's certainly something I try and do. It goes back to that idea of curiosity. Be curious, be the learner.
What a brilliant conversation. Thank you so much for your time.
Privilege.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Please hit subscribe, hit the notification bell, give us a thumbs up, leave a review, but somehow get involved with the High Performance Podcast and become part of our growing community. Thanks for being part of the adventure.